Today, we have the third day of the Opera Euro Rapid, the final preliminary games, which means that after today, we are going to know who makes the quarterfinals. Going into today, Magnus Carlsen is up top, Giri, Wesley So, Jan Nepomniachtchi, we've got Levon Ranyan, we've got a lot of these players, and a big group of players are competing to make the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th spot. So, I'm going to take you through the games of the day. I've got 5 games for you. Now, obviously, there were more decisive games than these. The players involved in the most decisive games today were Jan Krzysztof Duda and Daniel Dubov. But at the end, we will check in on our standings, and I will tell you who made it and who did not. So let's kick off with VIDIT Gujarati versus Magnus Carlsen. And the reason why I've included this game is because Magnus plays a very unique defense, the Stonewall defense. Now, when you play a defense where you've committed so many pawns on a certain color, means that that bishop of opposite color is going to be traded off quickly. And VIDIT plays a very clear plan. He plays b3. Magnus plays queen e7 to stop the bishop from coming to a3. So VIDIT plays bishop b2 and queen c1 and bishop a3. Just immediately going for the trade of this bishop. It's a very common plan, even trading the queens. This is how you kill black's fun. And slowly but surely, VIDIT brought the knight back to c2, played a4, and played g3, and was just ever so slightly better. He doubled up, but Magnus went for c5. And going for this is bold, because what ends up happening is that VIDIT is able to put all his pieces on their best squares. So now, after the move cd4, there's a move here for VIDIT, which is just winning on the spot. And it's a hard move because you've just suffered a capture in the middle. So naturally you want to play knight takes, but this is not the move. The move here for white, let me just take a sip of water. You can maybe pause, you'd like to find it. That move is bishop c6. Say why? Why is that the move? Well, bishop c6, the point is that it's a threat. It's a forcing move. And what VIDIT could do here is infiltrate. Once he infiltrates, then he can take back, then he can play knight f4, knight d5, rook b6, and he's just winning the game. But VIDIT played knight d4, and this allowed Magnus to get the rooks off. So now Magnus is playing an endgame, which normally Magnus is on the aggressive side of. But after VIDIT played the move b4, Magnus, all it took was one retreat, and he traps VIDIT's bishop on the edge of the board, wins the b4 pawn, and gets to an endgame where, despite there being a material balance of pawns, he has the passed b-pawn. And now he plays knight c5. This is all Magnus needs to win a game of chess. Bishop back. And VIDIT, in a time trouble, sacked a pawn to play king e3. To try to win this pawn back. And here Magnus, sharp as ever. Bishop e6. And you can't take. You take this, take, b3. You think you're in the square, but it doesn't matter because king f5. And now I'm coming in, I'm going to take all your pawns. And VIDIT, in tragic fashion, despite having a much better position, here resigned because, yes, he can win this pawn, but after b2, knight d2, there is knight c3 check. And now the knight not just checks the king, not only checks the king, it also just escorts the pawn. So Magnus, just unbeatable. I mean, sometimes you need to beat Magnus several times in the same game. And this was really the only decisive result of the first round, with the exception of one more. But so 2-6, or yes, 2-6. Now, this next game is short. Daniel Dubov versus Ding Liren. Ding Liren is suffering in this tournament, but today he did pull off a couple of very nice wins. So d4, knight f6. And this is the Catalan, to try to go g3, bishop g2. I've played it in many of my Win at Chess episodes. Very good, solid opening to put the bishop on the diagonal. Bishop b4 check, knight blocks. Now he takes because taking is impossible due to the pin. So bishop g2, a3, and castles. This knight can come and hit this pawn, but you've got to make sure that your center pawn here is guarded. So queen c2, he goes for it another way, now b5. And now a4. The point of a4 is to undermine the defense of the queen side. So black plays the move c6. Now the point of c6 is obviously you want to hold everything, but on the other side, you're kind of blocking this diagonal as well. And in this position, Daniel Dubov plays, well, It's a super Grandmaster game, right? So what does he play? You would think, oh, he castles or he plays knight e5. Now, h4, of course. In any position nowadays, this move seems playable. And after knight d7, h5, well, Ding Liren really didn't like the fact that h6 could happen, so he played h6 himself. Yeah, that doesn't stop Daniil. g4. What? What about this? Now I'm going to take on b5. And if you were to take back, I would play the move queen e4, forking you. So instead, bishop b7. And now, knight to h2. A backwards knight move, hitting this knight, and the pin on the pawn, and if you take me, I take this. And instead of that, Ding Liren thought for like 12 minutes and played knight takes f2. King takes f2, queen h4, and in this position resigned the game. 18 moves. 18 moves is all it took Daniil Dubov to defeat a player in Ding Liren who at some point was ranked top 3 in the world in every single time format. It's crazy to think about that fact, that Ding Liren is just so good at this game, but has to play these tournaments at such a ridiculous hour, and just in general has really struggled. I mean, that really is the truth. He has struggled in 2020, well, what more to say? Daniil, incredible. Some h4, a g4 inspiration in the Catalan. Seems like in any position nowadays you can be playing this h4 stuff. So, this game between Duda and Dubov. I guess you needed two guys to whose names start with Dudu. The Dudu World Championship to provide an exciting game. This game, oh gosh, this game. Chef's kiss. d4. We get a semi-Slav defense. e3, the Miran variation. And Duda, at this point, plays the move e4. We get c5, we get e5. The knight jumps to the middle to d5, knight g5. Take, bishop e7. Well, this knight is hanging. You don't need another invitation. Sacrifice the knight for a pawn. Check. Sacrifice the bishop. Not even taking the rook. Instead, he takes and goes like this. Takes. Check. Look at that. He doesn't just take the pawn right away. First, he throws in a little finesse there. Let me see where his head is at. Maybe he's going to blunder here. Of course, he can just take, but a little jostling there. A little maybe I'm going to repeat, maybe not. Now, what the heck is the material count here, my friends? Rook and 4 pawns versus bishop, knight. That is 9-9. Now, 9 equals 9. Congratulations, the recap video is over. I'll see you next time. Wow. But what on earth is, like, who's actually better? I mean, one guy's king is buck naked. This guy's got no clothes whatsoever. All his clothes are gone. The other guy's got a fully equipped army of pawns. So maybe we'll go f4, f5, d5, d6, and so on. So let's see what happens. Rook d1, knight comes back to f8, queen comes out, king slides back to the corner, d5. If you take on d5, which he does not do, if you take on d5, you've pinned yourself. So likely I can play c4, I can play e6, queen h5, just pick your bishop away. So the knight h7, d6, the bishop comes out to h4. He plays e6. These pawns are running straight down the board. There is nothing the Dubov can do, so he brings his queen out. Pawn to e7, literally going all the way, bishop c6. Gotta stop these guys from just rolling straight down the board. So g3 hits the bishop, but I can hit your queen. Queen comes out. Now I'm maybe threatening to push. Queen takes pawn on c3. You could take my pawn on my bishop on h4, but then queen f3 and I'm mating you. That's how delicate this game is hanging in the balance. So instead we get rook d5. If you take on d5, you've suddenly lost a key defender of these squares. And now black should sacrifice the bishop for the pawn, leaving just one pawn there. Then knight f6 will cover up. Instead, Dubov played knight to f6 right away. And then dynamite struck. Queen takes g8. Oh my goodness. Because if king takes d7, and you cannot stop both pawns. I told you there was going to be a pawn avalanche, so instead knight g8 and e8 queen. Bishop comes back to f6. Queen comes out to h5 check, king g7, and I'm going to push the next pawn. So knight f7. Dubov hanging on for dear life here so the pawn can't promote. Queen g4 check. Queen comes closer, but then Dubov says, wait a minute. I got my own pawns. King g7 and b3. Duda now. Both players in a time trouble. Duda takes this pawn. Duda at this point had only one winning move, apparently. Rook f4 to try to play rook g4 and just go straight for the king. Instead, the b pawn is going to probably promote. So bishop d8, sack, takes, queen d8. Queen comes back, check. Pawn blocks on f3. And there's a moment here where he can go check. King has to come out because if it goes back, there's mate. And this is just a draw. This position is just a draw. In fact, if you move forward, you can lose. After check, king g4, check, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to come back. Yeah, not so fast. Say, well, Levy, what's so bad about that? Well, you can make a queen. That's what's so bad about it. And then white is not going to be able to make a queen. You say, queen e8, check, Levy, it's not so bad. Yeah, and? Can you count? Guy's disappointing me, even though this is not a live action conversation. So in this position, Daniel Dubov, instead of giving a perpetual for a completely inexplicable reason, maybe for the love of the game, allowed a sequence of checks that ultimately culminates in a 4-queen position. The problem is that after one more check, which is all he can give, this is over. There is no excitement. There's 4 queens on the board, but one guy is just losing. So Daniel Dubov loses a game he completely didn't have to lose. I mean, I understand the beauty of the game. There's 4 queens, but come on, man. What is that? No need to lose like that. 4 queens, but Duda wins. Duda was involved in a lot of decisive games in this final day. And actually, this very next game features 2 people who we've already seen. And it began with a a6, some sort of weird knight f3, b5. I don't know what Magnus is going for here. Plays a Nimso with bishop g5. Magnus playing some really weird imbalanced stuff here. Look at this. Watch. g5. h5. Well, hold up. What? Magnus? What about castling? Magnus? What? What are you? What? Magnus, what is this? There's kids watching, man. You're the world champion. But the cool thing here is that the bishop on h2 can't really go anywhere. And Ding Liren built up this big structure of pawns. And his idea is that maybe in the future he's going to get the bishop out. Maybe he's going to play a4, a5. Try to advance on that side of the board. That's exactly what he does. Magnus says, I don't give a damn. f5. f5. This is a competition for who could push his pawns fastest. All their pawns. Takes. Things opening up. And now Ding Liren plays a key pawn break. Here Magnus Carlsen played a move that I completely don't understand, but he's the world champion, so maybe I should just shut up. King to b8. In hindsight, king to b8 proved to be a very dangerous move. Apparently dc5 was slightly better, and if takes, there is of course the opening of the position, but the computer, very brave, tries to argue that this is somehow okay for black. On a higher depth, it might realize that it's too dangerous. So after c5, he played king b8, just walking into this, take, and Ding Liren found a key move here, d5. Why? You can't take. Because of the pin, and so now your bishop is destabilized, and even though Ding Liren's pieces are a bit awkward, it's time for Mr. Ding to start putting the pressure on Magnus Carlsen. f4. Knight comes in, rook pins the knight, and yikes. And it was in this position that after the simple move g5, Ding Liren absolutely stomped on Magnus Carlsen. This was Magnus's first loss since round 1. It's round 1 and round 13 that he's losing. Maybe he loses again. I don't want to spoil anything in the recap, but crazy, absolutely insane to see this. Because Ding Liren, even in this in a bad form, was able to win such a beautiful game. Now, at the same time, while this was happening, a lot of players were beating each other up. There was a win. Aronian was beating Nepo. But I had to include this because it's just so shocking to see. How often do we see something like this? Magnus messing around and then goes, hey, I'm not having a good tournament, but put some goddamn respect on my name. And there you go. Now, in the penultimate round, Hikaru Nakamura with the blank pieces was victorious over Matthias Blubaum. And the final game of the day that I have for you, I've got the game between Hikaru and Sam Shankland. At this point, there are 4 people competing for 2 spots. I'm talking about Hikaru, I'm talking about Jan Krzysztof Duda, I'm talking about Daniel Dubov, I'm talking about Jan Niepomniachtchi. These 4 are competing for the final 2 spots. So let's see what happens. Hikaru starts out with a Sicilian. Well, he plays e4, we get a Sicilian. We actually get a line known as the classical Sicilian bishop g5. This is known as the Richter-Rauser variation, or the Rauser variation. And one where black puts these bishops on d7, e7, and then tries to play b5, rook c8, queen a5, some sort of attacking possibilities. Now, up until this moment, had all been seen before. Hikaru actually had this 2 times with the white pieces against none other than Daniel Dubov in August 2020 in a couple of matches that they played online. And that game featured c4, bc3, knight c3, and rook b8. So Hikaru pushes a pawn on the same side that he's being attacked to try to clamp down on the b5 square. And then brings back his bishop, plays knight b5, bishop d3, finishes his development, obviously, because that's one thing that he wants to do. And right here is when the fun begins. Sam Shankland plays d5. Hikaru responds by locking up the center. Sam Shankland plays the move bishop before going hello. So Hikaru moves over. The knight comes back, and now, look at this move. Bishop a7, a dynamite move with the intention to force some sort of rook movement. So now we've got a position with queen, 2 bishops, and a knight each, but black is the one playing significantly more passively. And there is a very cool plan in this position to infiltrate the black position. First, Hikaru plays the move h5. That prevents some movement of the king side, maybe g4, f4, g5. Shankland moves his king over. He's anticipating some sort of attack. Maybe his king will come and nuzzle itself in the warm embrace of his other pieces. Here comes g4, bishop b6, and knight a7. Queen takes on a4, and Hikaru plays the move queen e2. Now, he is not allowing this queen to come in. He is threatening bishop to b5, which just traps the queen on the edge of the board. Queen d7, queen c2, bishop b5. And in this position, Hikaru has a choice. Does he play knight c8 to try to get this position, which just looks awful for black? Or does he infiltrate, as he does in the game with queen h7? He chooses this with the mate threat. Black plays the move f6. And now, he gives a check. King f7, bishop d3. You can take my pawn, but then I have bishop d3, and I'm hunting you down. But Hikaru missed the move here. He missed the move, queen to f8. And that's actually the difference in this position. If he starts with the move bishop to d3 and doesn't give a check, then after take, check, here, there is no time for black to play the move queen to f8, and this is winning because check here, and you are winning the knight. White is going to be up a piece, but Hikaru does it in the inverse move order. And what happens is black is able to suddenly defend. So Hikaru, rather than trading all the pieces, plays queen back to h7. This allows black the luxury to take on e5, creating a getaway square for his king. But Hikaru plays the geometric move bishop to d8. Look at that. No moves for black. Only one move to survive for black, and that move is e4. Now after you take, black plays queen d6, trying to activate the queen and hit the bishop. And at this point, there's a ridiculous engine resource, which is the move g5. Sacrificing the bishop completely, queen g6 check, king to g8, and then queen to e6 check, and the position just shreds open, and who knows what on earth is going on. Just sack the bishop for nothing. Hikaru, not a man that wants to lose a bishop for seemingly no benefit, brings the bishop back. But after de4, suddenly, it's not really clear whose king is under fire. And after de4 with queen d1 and queen b6 and queen a6 problems, Hikaru's just down material. And his attack is not fast enough. He's still trying to chug away on this side with g5, but after this position, black is suddenly safe. And after h6, queen g1, it's suddenly white who is trying to fend off this big attack. And a few moves later, after the dust settled, black is up a piece. Black consolidates the position, and on move 58, after bishop takes b3, in lieu of the fact that black would play bishop b3, Hikaru resigned the final game of the preliminary round. And at the end of this round, a few other results had come in. Jan Krzysztof Duda drew his game, so he leapfrogged Hikaru by half a point. Dubov, who was half a point behind, drew his game versus Grishuk. And Nepo, who was half a point behind, lost. And so these are your final standings, ladies and gentlemen, of the preliminary stage. Magnus Carlsen still and Giri up top with 9.5 points. So with the 9. Comfortable 9. 8.5, 8.5, 8, 7. But that final spot, 7.5 tie between Dubov and Hikaru, their head-to-head was a draw, but the second tiebreak implemented Daniel Dubov. It's the number of wins. And Dubov, despite having more losses, 4 games that he won. Hikaru only won 3 games in the preliminary stage, and Daniel Dubov qualifies as the final quarterfinalist into the final 8. And Hikaru, in shocking fashion, had an opportunity to make a draw in the final round, and even was in a dominant position there at some moment. unfortunately, let it slip. And the way everything else shook out, and I mean, for me, unfortunate. You know, maybe some of you watching are like, oh, I'm happy, but, you know, I've done so many collabs with Hikaru. He's a good friend of mine, and it's rough. It's awful. I mean, to end like that, Hikaru obviously unhappy, but congratulations obviously are in order, and of course congratulations also to Sam Shankland. Let's not disrespect his defensive effort to find that one moment, Queen F8, and fight back. So on that note, our quarterfinals are set. Tomorrow the commentary continues with our final 8, and actually, one more time before we go, let's just take one final look, and I'll tell you who the matchups are. It's going to be Carlsen versus DUBOV. So a very exciting match there, considering that DUBOV worked on the team of Magnus Carlsen. We have Giri versus Duda, which is very interesting as well. Actually, to be honest, I think Carlsen has a better tiebreak than Giri, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But I think he does. I think he has one more win, but we'll see. And then obviously So versus Rajabov. And MVL and Aranyan, the only 2 players with 8.5, they just go head-to-head. 2 days of each quarterfinal, semifinal, and then final. And then after that, ladies and gentlemen, we know the winner of the Opera Euro Rapid.